Welcome to Inside the Outside. I'm Christy Kirk.
And I'm Gary Kirk. This week we're going to be talking to Warren Ashworth, the owner of Cedar Ridge Outdoors. Warren has an awesome story about how he went from a DIY quilt guy to a small business owner.
Warren's going to share some tips on how to stay warm in your hammock. And we also have a big announcement at the end of the show. So let's get started.
Well, Warren, we really appreciate you joining us today. What got you from being your average outdoors person into Cedar Ridge Outdoors?
Well, thanks for having me. Ever since I was a kid, my dad's had, me and my brother in the outdoors, growing up, hiking and fishing and climbing mountains. I grew up in California, just outside Yosemite National Park. So we spent a lot of time hiking to alpine lakes and trout fishing and camping and stuff. So it was just kind of ingrained in me as a child. I love for the outdoors. So as I got older in life, I realized that sleeping on the ground really wasn't for me anymore. So I kind of transitioned over to a hammock, and I'm sure, many people are very familiar with the journey into hammock camping. There's a lot of options out there, and it can get rather confusing, and you don't really know what to pick. I started off with the Eno double nest, and I was wanting to go back to a tent. So I'm a fairly big guy. I'm 6'2", 300 pounds. I'm a big guy. Shortly after I bought the Eno double nest, I was doing a lot of research about camping in a hammock, and I came across hammock forums. And great resource for everything hammock camping, by the way. And started learning about this kind of subculture of hammock camping and these cottage vendors. I'd never heard of them. And, I ended up, my next hammock was a War Bonnet Blackbird XLC. Love that thing.
Sure.
Still couldn't I could sleep good during the night, but I'd toss and turn. I'd wake up a little bit sore in the morning. And, then I started learning about DIY, and I was like, my daughter's got a sewing machine in the closet that she never uses.
That story sounds so familiar.
And figure it out. So I pulled this $100 sewing machine that's been in the closet for 3 years out, and watched some YouTube videos on how to turn the thing on and thread it and sew with it. And I made my first hammock. It was 12 foot by like 60 inches wide. Netless hammock, hung it up in the backyard, climbed in it, and it was a nice breezy summer day, one of them really nice sunny breezy summer days, not too hot. Immediately fell asleep.
Yep. I know the feeling.
Like, this is what they're talking about. So I researched more and into looking into getting some hammock camping gear, under quilts, top quilts, tarps, and this and that. I ended up, my first cottage vendor tarp that I bought was Underground Quilts, the Hanger 12. That was my first tarp that I had. I kept DIYing along the way, and I made a tarp that we still have hanging around the shop somewhere, and the thing is just absolutely ridiculous looking. My partner in the shop, Richard, he always says that the thing will never leak water because there's at least a pound of silicone on it.
Hey, you got to do what you got to do to make it work.
Yeah. Back to the quilts, it was, you could find like cheaper quilts and this and that, but being a big guy, when you start adding in the long, the wide, and top and bottom quilts, it gets really expensive.
Yep.
At the time, I was a single dad on a public servant salary, and I just didn't have that kind of money. So I ended up making a top quilt, and I remember when I was a little bit trepidatious about making it. I was like, man, this is a big deal. I don't know if I'm gonna be able to pull this off. I ended up knocking the thing out in like 5 or 6 hours, done, and it looked pretty good. Some of my friends that I do some hiking with and camping at times, they saw it, and they're like, hey, you want to make me something? And I was like, yeah, I enjoy doing it. You pay me for materials and I'll whip it up for you. So I made some quilts and some tarps, and, just kind of went along like that, just, making stuff for people, and just, not really making a living at it, just because I enjoy doing it. It was a hobby. On Facebook, I started selling some of the stuff that I made just to fund making new stuff. I kind of got a name, and I don't know if anybody's familiar with the Backpacker Gear Flea Market.
Oh yeah.
I don't know what it's up to now. It's over 50,000 people on there. At that time, there was not. There was like 1,000 or 2,000 people on there when I first got in there. Well, I started getting a name in there of a guy that makes good stuff. So I started making stuff for people on the flea market, or I'd make stuff and sell it on the flea market, and it just kept kind of snowballing. Just kept building and building and building. And one of my friends, we were out hiking one day, and we were talking about the stuff that I made, and Cedar Ridge wasn't even a thing then. It was just me. He said, "Man, he says you seem like you're making stuff all the time," and he says, "Maybe you should make it into a business." And I don't know why the thought hadn't ever occurred to me before then. I was like, maybe I will.
Now, what year was that? How long ago was it that this was just an idea floating around in your head while you're hiking?
2014.
Okay.
Oh, wow.
Was when it was an idea in my head. 2015, I actually got a name, got a business license, and went into business.
Fantastic.
And I think my first year, I maybe sold, I don't know, maybe $3,000 worth of stuff. I mean, it was a lot to me at that time. I had a bunch of stuff I was doing. I was making these little bags and stuff sacks for people, custom like size stuff sacks, and a few quilts here and there, made some hammocks. It started, I started really gaining some momentum through Facebook. And I got to the point of like, I have more stuff than I could do in a year. I need to possibly get some help. So one of my best friends, Richard, we've been friends for quite a while. I asked him, I said, "Hey, would you be interested in coming and help me sell some stuff?" And he said, "Yeah." So he started coming to my house every day. Me and him we work EMS. I'm a paramedic. He's a EMT. We work in different counties here in Tennessee, but so we both work a 24-hour shift. He'd come over to the house for a couple of days, and we'd sew stuff, and we go back on the ambulance. So it kind of went on like that for a while. We were in my kitchen. My wife absolutely hated it. We were cutting material in the kitchen floor and rolling tarps out across the living room, and I'm sewing these things at the kitchen table with this $100 Brother sewing machine from Walmart, and this thing sounds like it's about to explode at any moment. Like late 2015, Cedar Ridge itself, not just me, but Cedar Ridge itself really started getting some attention, like more than just off the flea market. There were people contacting me from other places.
Right.
So me and Richard kind of became partners in this at this time. So we both decided, hey, we're gonna spring and we're gonna go buy an industrial sewing machine.
Time to move out of the dining room, huh?
Well, I thought that I could put this thing in the kitchen. Not gonna happen. My wife shut that down real fast.
Yeah, I know. Anytime I do a DIY project, our dining room just turns into Gary's workshop, and it's a mess. Christy.
Yeah, those projects only get to stay in the dining room for so long. There is a time limit. Yeah. So I feel for your wife there.
I know the feeling well. Hey, pick up your stuff, get your hammocks and quilts out of here. There's down all over the bathroom. What have you been doing in here?
Yeah, exactly. Now, she doesn't complain at all when she crawls in that nice cozy under and over quilt that I made her.
Well, now that's true. But I mean, and we're going to diverge here, but he made a great underquilt and overquilt. But I have to admit that when he also started with our daughter's sewing machine that had been sitting dusty in the closet. And I just thought, this is one of these projects. It's never going to come to fruition. And of course, now we have great quilts.
See, my wife had the same exact thought with me. I'm always been, kind of get 10 projects going and don't finish any of them.
Yeah.
That sounds really familiar.
It's like, she says, so she's got this idea of it's going to pass. He'll be over it in, a month, 2 months. Well, 6 months later, a year later, 2 years later, I'm still doing it. And she's still thinking, This is just a hobby. It's going to pass.
Well, I'm glad that she's wrong. I've seen some of your handiwork out on the trail, and there's some really nice quilts. I don't know what your first quilt looked like, but your stitching was a heck of a lot better looking than mine when I was at the last hang event.
Well, I appreciate that. We work real hard to make sure that our stuff is on par, and if it's not, or if somebody has a problem, we usually try everything we can to make them happy. So.
And I think that's one of the big advantages of a cottage vendor like yourself versus those out of the box things. You don't, if you have a problem with something that comes out of the box, when you pick up the phone to call for support or, whatever, you don't know who you're going to be talking to and you don't know what kind of results you're going to get. But if they have a problem with your product, when they pick up the phone, they're talking to you or one of the guys right there next to you.
Oh, absolutely. So to kind of rewind back to the sewing machine, we had this humongous industrial sewing machine, this big Juki used sewing machine that we bought from this company close to where we live here that rehabs sewing machine, refurb sewing machines. We didn't have any place to put the thing. So there's quite a few Mennonites that live around here, and a lot of them build these little mobile sheds that they haul out and set off at your property. And so we went up there and we bought one of them.
There you go.
And they brought it to the house and dropped it off, and we run power to it and threw an air conditioner in it and the sewing machine, and we went to work.
That's awesome.
And I still have the shed behind my house. Actually, just moved out of the shed the first of the year.
Wow.
And this whole time, the business is just growing and growing and growing. And being somebody who's not from a business background, my whole life has either been construction or in emergency services. So I had no experience running a business. Some of the challenges with that was trying to stay ahead of the growth, because that's what a lot of people told me is, being a small business, if you don't stay ahead of the growth, kill you.
Yeah. Yeah. You'll drown in all that. All of a sudden you become the guy that can't fulfill the orders.
Yeah. And, there for a while, I was always very honest with people, they'd ask me what the lead time was on it, and I'd be very honest. Look, this is how long it's going to be, and they say, okay, no problem. And if something happened, I always picked up the phone and called them, and I still do that today. I always try to be honest with people. If I can't do something or I can do something, I'm going to be honest with you. While this business was growing, it's just me and Richard in the shop working, and the orders keep coming in, and orders keep coming in, and orders keep coming in, and it got to a point where we're like, we got to do something. Like we have to do something. We ended up hiring somebody to come sew part-time for us, which actually happened to be another friend of mine. She's a retired firefighter for 35 years.
That's awesome.
That's great.
And so she came and sewed, and she's one of the best things that's ever happened to Cedar Ridge. I mean, she keeps us straight. She's the enforcer, man. She keeps everybody on task.
That's what you need.
Yeah. And so kind of fast forward, we knew that we were growing, and we knew that we put out a good product. And we knew that it was just a matter of getting gear to people and getting our name out there. Well, we run a sale back on Labor Day of 2018, and this was kind of the turning point for us, which is not that long ago.
Sure.
It was 3 of us in the shop there for a long time, up until just a few months ago. We run the sale, and we had some sales coming in. Usually you run a sale, you get a pickup on orders, and I went to bed, and I get up the next morning, and there's like 40 orders come through.
Oh, wow.
And I was like, what? And I was kind of shocked, and as this thing went on, we ended up with like 80 orders over 3 days.
Wow.
And to my downfall, I guess, I should have shut it down way before that. And we kind of run a little over on lead times on that sale and stuff. And I was stressed out about it, tore up about it, because I hate not being able to meet a deadline. So after that happened, me and Richard really knew that some things had to change, so we started talking about moving into a different shop and we actually had bought 2 brand new industrial machines during this time. We ended up taking a trip to Maine to go to a hang was just kind of one of them things, there's going to be people there, a bunch of people there, and heck, we like to travel, so let's go to Maine.
Yep.
So we went up there and we made a couple connections. Most notably Alex Thomas from Dutchware. Well, then as the fall Maha hang was coming up in Pennsylvania, we kind of went back and forth with Alex a little bit, and he says, "Hey, you know what? Why don't you guys come on up? If you guys come up," he says, "after the hang, you guys can come on down to Lancaster, and we'll put you up and come over and tour Dutchware." Because they're supplying a lot of material to us at this time. And so we made that trip. We went up to Pennsylvania and, enjoyed a wonderful weekend hanging with like-minded people, and went to Dutch's and, to be sitting there with Dutch and Alex, Dutch is, everybody knows Dutch.
Of course.
It was a little surreal to me when he tells me, "Hey, I like what you guys are doing. We'd like to carry your quilts."
That had to feel really good.
I was flabbergasted. I was like, "What?"
That's when you've made it.
Yeah. I mean, and then, and I remember leaving there, and, me and Richard are in the car, and we're driving back to Tennessee, and we just both looked at each other and we're just like, "Dude." And he's like, "I know." That's all we had to say.
Exactly.
But we knew we had to get it together right then.
Yep.
So the hunt was on at that point to find us a space to move into, and it was a long process and a little expensive, but we've gotten into we've moved out of the shed in my backyard in a 1,600 square foot building now, and we've added some sewing machines on. We've hired a couple more people, and we're cranking along now.
That's an awesome story. I've always been the guy that pulls for the underdog. So when you hear about somebody that, is just doing it as a sort of a labor of love, making it from, that one step to the big game, that's awesome. Anytime you go to any of these big hang events, that's one of the fun parts is walking around and seeing what gear everybody has. And, everybody likes to talk about their gear, whatever it is that they like. And, the other cool thing, I've noticed, especially in the hammock community, people love to share. And, if you show up at one, I went, back in the fall with Tar Heel State Hangers, and Chris Gherkin was there. As soon as he saw me, he's like, "Hey, you don't have to necessarily unpack. I've got a bunch of different kinds of quilts and hammocks and stuff like that if you want to try them out." And everybody else was the same way. It was just like, this big family that wants to help each other out.
Wow, absolutely. I mean, the hammock community it's a really great community of people. It's amazing to me that, all these people come together over a love for the outdoors and a love for hammocks.
Yeah, it really is a great community. And I think it's terrific that all of these small businesses like yours and so many others have been able to flourish thanks to hammock camping. I mean, I'm sure that 10 years ago, you never thought, "Oh, I'm going to have a business making hammocks." It was never even an option at that point, but it's so cool that hammocks, hammock camping has grown to such a place that it can support so many cottage vendors and really become just this cool space in the outdoor world.
Yeah, absolutely. And, one thing I have to say about a lot of the cottage vendors, I guess maybe people that are more towards the brand loyal or big box stuff because, it's a bigger company and they got more power behind them so they can guarantee products. But one thing that really stands out to me about the cottage vendor industry is these are people that are making gear, that they use. I mean, these are like hammock campers making gear for hammock campers, or hikers making gear for hikers. It's not just, we just sit there and make the stuff. We like to use it too. We like to go out and, we're gearheads too. It's not just about Cedar Ridge gear. I like all stuff. If it's new, I want to see it.
Well, and that's another thing that you mentioned, like with the cottage vendors, naturally, I mean, there's competition. You want to be able to sell your product just like Loco Libre does or Dutch or whoever. But at the same time, if you needed a favor, you could pick up the phone and call somebody at Loco Libre or Dutch or, somebody, and they're going to help you out. This is a family that one of you is winning, then everybody's winning.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
I also think this is where the innovation is happening because, the big companies, certainly they bring out new products, but they're doing it from an entirely different place. And you're doing it from hey, I was out in the woods this weekend and I need this thing.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, our underquilts that we make, they've gone through a kind of a progression, I guess, different versions of it, to where we're at now with it. And, how that product got tweaked into what it is now is by me going out and camping with it.
Exactly.
I don't like this about the quilt. I want to change this about the quilt. And the same thing with our top quilts. It was the exact same thing. It's been a trial and error thing. And I'm always trying to keep our products of high quality and work well. I know how hard it is to drop a bunch of money on a piece of gear. And so when somebody gives me that trust to give them quality piece of gear, I want to give them every bit of value for every penny that they spent with me. Because, I really tried to build something with Cedar Ridge where it's just not about me making gear and selling it to you. I've always tried to treat our customers like I'd want to be treated.
If only the rest of the world could operate with that kind of an attitude, we'd all be in a better place.
Oh, absolutely.
So, moving forward here, what's on the horizon for Cedar Ridge?
I think hopefully in the nearer future, I'll be coming off working the ambulance full time. So I still work full time on an ambulance and run Cedar Ridge. So I burn my candle at both ends sometimes, but that'll be step number one of I'll just be full time at Cedar Ridge.
So you mentioned, right now you're doing full-time paramedic work and full-time Cedar Ridge. How do you even find time to get out on the trail?
Lately, there's not been a lot of time.
Well, hopefully that's going to change in the near future. When you go out, what kind of trips do you like to go out on? Are you a solo person? Do you like to go in groups? Do you like long trips, short trips? What gets you out there?
I can do solo. I can go with friends. I don't know. It feels like as I get older and, my joints have taken a beating over the years, especially my knees, the longer and longer trips are harder to do these days. But, I'm perfectly fine with hiking 5 miles, setting up camp and going and exploring around and, and then doing it again the next day, hike another 5-6 miles until I'm tired and set up camp and go explore around, get the pack off my back. And, to me, getting in the outdoors is my release.
I hear you.
That's where when I come back from a trip, I may be sore, I may be tired, but I feel good and I feel peaceful, so that's the purpose that I do it. I love being out there. I love the feeling that it gives me and being just away from everything. I'm plugged and, so, I mean, it doesn't matter as long as I'm with good people or I'm by myself. I mean, it's as long as I'm out there, that's all that matters.
I hear you. That's our whole thing. When you get out of that normal day-to-day routine, and you get on the trail, I don't care if it's just a local park that you go walk in or whether you go jump on the AT and get, deep in the wilderness, there is a refreshing feeling that comes over you that, it's something that we crave and we have to do. That's what motivated us to do the podcast, is just to try to get other people up off their butt and out on the trail. Go do it. Hike your own hike, hang your own hang, whatever it is that you want to do. Just get up and get out. Yeah,
absolutely. And, there's a lot of culture, I guess, in the backpacking world of big miles and, this and that. And, it's really important for people to understand is, if that's your thing, big miles, cool, that's your thing. But there's other people where that's not their thing, and that's okay too. It doesn't matter. I mean, the mileage isn't what matters. That's not to me. It's just I mean, it's the connection and it's the experience, I think.
Yeah, I totally agree. So, when you go out on the trail, I'm just kind of curious. Everybody has their sort of go-to things that they always have on them. What are your, one or two things that you're going to have with you, whether you do miles or whether you're just going out for a day hike? Do you have any like those everyday carry kind of things that you always have when you head out on the trail?
Besides the water filter, I mean, I always carry a water filter with me, whether I'm out hiking a couple miles or multiple days. I always have a water filter. And especially here in Tennessee in the summertime, you can go through some water pretty fast. I mean, the heat and the humidity just takes it out of you. I don't know. I guess other than that, I usually have a hammock in my backpack, no matter where I'm at. There may not be quilts or anything in there, but there's usually a hammock. I can usually find a good spot to hang a hammock and relax for a minute in the woods.
Christy is definitely of that thought process. I like to fish, and I like to hike fish. So I've found that around here we've got a lot of trails in North Carolina where if you're willing to go more than 3 miles, you can get past all those fair weather fishermen, and you can actually get into some really good fishing spots. Now she doesn't like to fish, but she loves to read, and that's how we trade off. We'll go for a hike. I'll find a place to fish, and she throws up the hammock and usually reads and falls asleep.
Well, I mean, that's true. That's why you like a hammock, right? Because you get comfortable and you have a little nap. I'll put it in the backyard and in the weather, in nice weather too, and lay out in my hammock and read for an afternoon and enjoy a little bit of peace and quiet. It doesn't happen nearly often enough, but my hammock's always with me too. Well, I'm wondering, we've hit on it a little bit. We've talked about how important the underquilt is, but we're in January right now. We're in peak winter hiking season. What are some suggestions you have or some ideas to make sure that you are staying warm out on the trail or on overnights?
I think one of the biggest things is something that you need to do beforehand, and that's you need to test your gear out. You need to know how it's going to work for you, what temperatures you can be in. A lot of people say, "Oh, I got 20-degree stuff. I'm going to go take off into the woods," and next thing you know, they're in the backcountry and they're freezing their butt off. So it's really important to test your gear before you go out.
I've always felt like you can tell the people that are fair weather outdoorsmen or outdoors people compared to people that have done it before. Because like you said, if you buy 20-degree rated gear, that's one thing. But have you slept in it at 20 degrees and said, oh, yeah, this is fine? If you have, then you've got it licked. But I have never found any manufacturer out there that can rate something that everybody unanimously will agree upon.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, and, in our ratings, we always talk about, that our quilts are comfort rated, and which they are. We really try to take a good slice of people, that have used our quilts and have given us feedback on them and kind of made an average, of to try to comfort rate these quilts. But it's so subjective, just like, you were saying a minute ago that you needed a quilt 20 degrees, rated 20 degrees higher than what the temperature was going to be. Or,
exactly.
Colder than what the temperature was going to be. I mean, it's so subjective to the individual.
It is.
So it's very important for the individual to learn the limits of their gear.
Yeah.
Yes, and learn it before they're in the woods.
Yeah.
Just like you said.
It's not the place to do it.
No, it's not the place to do it. It's a very sad place to do it.
So besides the testing your gear out aspect and knowing the limits of your gear, that goes along with the safety thing. You don't want to get yourself in a situation that's potentially dangerous to yourself with hypothermia and this and that. But I think a big key is dry clothes.
Very good
dry
point.
Socks, dry underwear, whatever you sleep in, dry. And I'm not just talking about rain dry. You can feel dry, and if you sleep in clothes that you've hiked in, you're going to feel it pretty fast where it's still wet.
Yeah.
Especially when it's cold, this time of year, cold's unforgiving. It's going to find your weak spot, and it's going to mercilessly punch it.
Yeah, yes, it is. Gary actually laughs at me because I always take pajamas when we hike, because those clothes that you've been in, there is moisture somewhere. And my pajamas are warm and dry, and they keep me warm with my good, warm, comfy quilt, I'm good.
I like to pick on her because I'll take a change of clothes to, something dry to put on when I get in the hammock, but she has like pink polka dotted, full top bottom cotton pajamas. And it's quite the sight sitting around the campfire before we go to bed.
But I'm warm.
You are warm and dry.
And dry.
So, I've experimented with some different like sleeping attire over the years, and I've found what works best for me is just a t-shirt and some shorts and a dry pair of socks. I wear, a dry t-shirt, a dry shorts, and dry pair of socks, even in the middle of winter.
That's almost exactly what I wear. I'll usually wear longer pants, but t-shirt, either shorts or pants, depending on the time of year, and a good pair of dry wool socks, and I'm happy as can be.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then I also have my backups with me in my hammock. If it starts getting cold, or I start getting cold, or whatever, I carry a balaclava that I can put over my head if my head starts getting cold, and I also carry, I don't know if you ever heard of Bonefire Gear. They make these they're called igneous socks. No. Time shield socks. I love those things.
I've got to check those out.
If my feet get cold, I'm cold.
Yeah, that's me too.
I take very drastic measures to keep my feet warm.
No, I'm with you. And, a lot of people like to wear, heavier clothes, or maybe even an extra layer of clothes. I've found, like you were mentioning, I don't want to wear all that much when I'm sleeping. I like to be able to strip down as lightweight as I can. So for me, I would rather pick a heavier under and an over quilt so that I can stay in those lightweight clothes when I'm sleeping, so that I don't have all that bunched up around me.
Well, one thing, and I don't know if it's true, but to me, it seems like it's the case for me. When I have more clothes on, it takes me longer to get warmed up in my hammock.
Yep. I'm totally with you.
And then besides sleeping attire, or, being dry and wearing the proper sleeping attire, it takes experience to learn how to be comfortable, especially in the wintertime. Anybody can go out in the middle of summer, and it's 80 degrees at night. It really puts you to the test, in the winter months. If that's your thing, if you want to go out in the winter months, you need to be prepared. That means knowing yourself, knowing your clothes, knowing your equipment, is very important in these months.
Yeah, Christy's only had a couple outings, I think, that were really cold. I know Stone Mountain was one that...
Yeah, and I bailed on that one.
Yeah, we were at Stone Mountain State Park, and it got down in the teens that night, and she bailed and hopped in the car. No judgment, because it did get really cold. But we're going to do a frosty butt hang. We're anxious to try that out and see how hot or cold it turns out to be. North Carolina, you never know what to expect in the winter.
No, I'm hoping for one of those 70-degree North Carolina winter days.
Yeah.
Good luck.
I might have a sweaty butt hang. Who knows?
Yeah. We had 70 earlier this week, so I'm keeping hope alive.
Well, Warren, we really appreciate you coming on the show today. We'll make sure to put links to your website and all your social media and everything in our show notes. We'd love to maybe hook up on the trail with a hang sometime.
Absolutely, and anybody who's listening is going to be at HangCon this year. We're at the end of this month. We're going to be down there, so we're heading down to HangCon in Florida.
Oh, that's fun.
Yeah, that'll be a huge event.
And we'll be up at Trail Days this year, so we won't have a booth. We haven't had the privilege of getting a booth yet at Trail Days, but we'll be up there mooching.
I'm sure you'll find somebody that'll let you hang out there.
Absolutely. Gary, it's been a big week here for Inside the Outside. Do you want to share the big news?
Absolutely. So over the weekend, we made a trip to the land of the turtles. Christy and I visited the Terrapin Outfitters factory in Columbia, South Carolina, and we're so excited to announce that Terrapin Outfitters is our first show sponsor. I met owner Scott Buff back at a Tar Heel State Hangers event last fall. We sat down and did a short interview at the Hangsgiving event, and things just seemed to click. We were bouncing ideas off of each other left and right, and then we just made some plans to meet up in the future.
The thing that most excites me about this partnership is that Scott makes gear that I would endorse without the sponsorship. I know he puts his heart and soul into everything he makes. He has such creative, innovative ideas. And like many cottage vendors, he's carving out a niche in this hammock camping world that's exploded over the last few years. The two products that really set him apart from the rest are the Turtle Tote and the Hatchling. And the Turtle Tote is this really cool stuff sack that allows you to put your entire sleep system and hammock into a single bag. And you're thinking, I can put that stuff into a single bag right now. Not this way. It's so cool because everything you pack is already assembled. You can deploy or tear down in minutes. It's really cool. It's really fast. The minute I saw it in action, my thought was, where has this been all my life?
And the Hatchling is this hammock chair that should probably carry some type of an FDA warning as a sedative because it's just so dang comfortable. When we were down at the factory, our son Dylan climbed in one and just absolutely loved it. His personal endorsement, when we asked him what he thought about it, he just said, these Hatchlings are awesome. You can get them in tons of different colors, and they offer all kinds of custom options for how you want to use them. And they even come with modular shells, so you can put underquilts underneath them to stay warm. They're just a really, really cool product. So go check out their website at terrapinoutfitters.com. We'll also have a link to them in our show notes and on our website.